April 1945. A salt mine near Merkers, Thuringia, Germany deep underground. The damp air smells of ancient earth and sudden sharp decay. A small patrol of American soldiers moves through a cavernous, dark tunnel, their flashlights cutting through the thick blackness. They expect to find hidden munitions or perhaps abandoned machinery left behind by the retreating German army. Instead, the beams of their lights bounce off gilded picture frames, massive oil paintings, and thousands of heavy wooden crates stacked to the ceiling. It is an underground vault filled with the stolen cultural heritage of an entire continent. But as the flashlights tilt downward, the light hits something else. Heavy canvas bags sit directly underneath a masterpiece by Rembrandt. Inside those bags is a different kind of plunder. A lone American soldier reaches out, pulls open a drawstring, and stares at a mountain of gold dental fillings. This is the story of what soldiers found that changed them forever. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show what soldiers found that changed them forever. What Patton found 2,100 feet underground next to stolen masterpieces, April 1945. A dark, damp salt mine near Merkers, Germany. A heavy iron cage descends deep into the earth, its cables groaning under the weight of an American military patrol. 2,000 feet below the surface, the air grows hot and thick with the smell of old salt and decaying wood. The flashlights cut through the absolute blackness, reflecting off vast walls of white mineral. Then, the beams hit something artificial. Hundreds of wooden crates sit stacked inside an immense subterranean cavern. A soldier pries open the top box with his bayonet, expecting ammunition or rifles. Instead, the pale light reveals a gold-framed canvas by Rembrandt, its painted eyes staring back from the darkness. Beside it rests a crude canvas sack. Inside the sack are thousands of gold dental fillings, still covered in ash and dried blood. General George Patton will answer this discovery with an unyielding mandate that defines the difference between a soldier and a thief. Private First Class Robert Kowalski was 20 years old. He came from a family of Polish immigrants in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and served with the Third Army. Before the draft took him, he spent his mornings descending into the dark coal seams of western Pennsylvania, shovel in hand. His father had died in those same shafts, coughing up black dust, leaving Kowalski with a deep understanding of subterranean spaces and a quiet, hardened resilience. He had seen his share of blood from Normandy to the Rhineland, but nothing prepared him for the cold stillness of the German salt cavern. He stood at the entrance with his rifle pressed against his chest, his boots caked in white salt dust. He was the one who jammed a wooden beam against the iron vault door, refusing to leave his post because he knew what lay behind it. The system that filled that cavern had no single face, but its spirit lived in the meticulous records left behind by the Nazi looting apparatus. The inventory books were bound in fine pigskin, written in a precise, flowing bureaucratic hand. Each page detailed the systematic stripping of Europe's soul, treated not as a crime, but as a standard state asset liquidation. The men who compiled these ledgers were not unpolished thugs. They wore tailored wool uniforms, polished their leather jackboots to a mirror shine, and carried centuries of aristocratic family crests on their signet rings. To them, a priceless medieval altarpiece stolen from a cathedral in Warsaw, and a sack containing 80 pounds of gold teeth wrenched from the jaws of dead prisoners were exactly the same. They were simply numbers. They were assets to be logged, stored, and protected for the survival of the Reich. Kowalski represented the dirty reality of the coal face. The ledger represented the cold, clean madness of the desk. By April 1945, the European war was collapsing into a frantic scramble across a ruined landscape. The German front line had shattered into scattered pockets of desperate resistance, and the Allied armies raced forward to claim the remnants of the territory. In this chaotic final push, the traditional boundaries of the battlefield dissolved entirely. Combat units were no longer just engaging the enemy. They were stumbling into the administrative infrastructure of a collapsing empire. Supply lines were broken, communications were non-existent, and local governments simply vanished overnight, leaving behind vast storehouses of machinery, documents, and plundered goods. It was a period of extreme fluidity, where an ordinary infantry patrol could turn a corner and discover the entire financial reserve of a nation sitting unguarded in a village barn. In the months leading up to this advance, many Allied officers had chosen to overlook the strange irregularities they encountered in the field. There was a war to win, and the immediate pressure of the tactical advance took precedence over investigating every sealed warehouse or suspicious cargo train. Broken supply trucks filled with looted French wine or stolen Belgian tapestries were often pushed into ditches and ignored. The sheer scale of the displacement made it easy for commanders to look the other way, treating the strange discoveries as secondary casualties of the larger conflict. They focused their energy on the map lines and the river crossings, leaving the administrative cleanup for the bureaucrats who would arrive months after the guns fell silent. But the deep caverns under Thuringia refused to be ignored, forcing the advancing Americans to look directly into the ledger of a continental theft. The scale of the wealth hidden beneath the earth demanded immediate, high-level attention, bringing the casual movement of the front line to a sudden absolute halt. An American military police captain stood in the subterranean vault, shining his flashlight directly onto the open ledger. Beside him stood a German administrative officer, his uniform impeccably pressed despite the dust of the mine shaft. The captain pointed his finger at a specific line in the book, his voice echoing off the salt walls. "This line right here," the captain said. "Explain what this entry means." The German officer smiled faintly, adjusting his silver collar tabs with a gloved hand. "It is an inventory list, Captain," the German said. "It is standard state accounting for the financial reserves of the Reich." The captain tapped the page hard. "It lists 40 bags of dental gold," the captain said, 8,500 kilograms. "Where did this gold come from?" "It came from the regional collection centers," the German answered. "It is property of the state, properly weighed and logged according to our legal regulations." The captain stepped closer, the beam of his light hitting the German's clean boots. "These are teeth," the captain said. "These are fillings pulled out of the mouths of dead people in camps. You logged them next to paintings by Rembrandt. Art and currency are both assets." "The captain," the German said, "the state requires meticulous documentation for all assets. We are simply maintaining order." The captain shook his head, his face hardening in the dim light. "This is a crime scene," the captain said. "I am ordering you to step away from these crates and hand over the master keys to every vault door in this tunnel." The German officer did not move, his posture remaining rigid and arrogant. "I am the designated custodian of this repository," the German said. "I take orders only from the financial ministry in Berlin, not from an occupying officer who does not understand state administration." "You are a prisoner," the captain said. "Your ministry is gone. Give me the keys now." The German turned his back to the captain, looking down at the stacks of crates. "These cultural treasures require specialized care," the German said. "If you disrupt our storage system, you will destroy history. Your coarse soldiers have no right to touch these pieces." The captain pulled his radio from his belt, his eyes fixed on the German's iron cross. "Get me 3rd Army headquarters," the captain said into the receiver. "We have a situation at the Merkers mine that requires immediate command authority." The report reached Patton within the hour. Patton's jeep pulled up to the mine entrance within the hour. 4 stars gleamed on his helmet. 2 ivory-handled revolvers rested in the holsters at his belt. He stepped out of the vehicle, his face carved from ice, his jaw set in a hard, straight line. He did not say a word as the iron cage carried him down into the shaft. He stepped into the subterranean chamber, his polished boots crunching against the salt floor. The room went dead silent. The American soldiers snapped to attention, while the German officer tried to maintain his rigid posture, adjusting his fine wool tunic. Patton walked straight toward the large table where the master ledger lay open. He did not raise his voice. His words were quiet, but they carried to the farthest corners of the salt vault. "Is this the record of the repository?" Patton asked. "It is the official state inventory, General," the German said. "You logged 40 bags of human teeth next to European masterpieces," Patton said. The items were delivered together as state assets. General, the German answered. We merely catalogued them, according to standard administrative protocol. Patton looked down at the open page, his fingers resting near his holster. You call this administration, Patton said. We are professionals preserving wealth and culture, the German said. You are not professionals, Patton said. You are thieves who stand guard over the spoils of murder. You sit in a clean room with a fountain pen while men are slaughtered for the gold in their mouths. You think your fine uniform and your precise ledgers separate you from the trenches. They do not. They make you the clerk of an atrocity. Your records list 8,500 kilograms of dental gold extracted from the victims of your camps. Patton said, you filed those human beings under the same category as oil paintings and currency reserves. You treated the systematic destruction of human life as a bookkeeping exercise. You believed the darkness of this mine would keep your ledgers hidden from the world. Private Kowalski has stood watch at this door for 36 hours without sleep. Patton said, he understands what a mine is for. He understands hard labor. You understand only how to profit from the suffering of people who could not fight back. You will now learn what happens when your administrative machinery meets the reality of an army. You have a choice, Patton said. You will pick up the first crate of stolen property, or you will be locked in the dark vault with the bags of teeth until the monuments men arrive. Decide now. The German officer looked at Patton's cold eyes, his arrogance vanishing into the damp air, and slowly reached for the handles of a heavy wooden box, what Patton found 100 feet underground, next to stolen masterpieces, April 1945. A salt mine near Merkers, Thuringia, Germany. Deep underground, a single heavy wooden door stands locked inside a dark limestone cavern. American soldiers carry flashlights, their boots crunching on loose salt crystals in the damp air. A crowbar forces the padlock open with a sharp metallic snap. The door swings back to reveal thousands of canvas sacks stacked neatly from floor to ceiling. Inside these bags rest gold bars, priceless European paintings, and smaller canvas sacks filled with thousands of gold teeth torn from the dead. It is a single room where high culture meets industrial murder, cataloged together on the exact same paper ledgers. General George S. Patton will soon stand in this vault, look at the hoard, and deliver a punishment that forces the men who built this room to look at exactly what they have done. Private First Class Robert Kowalski did not stay in Europe to celebrate the victory. He went home to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in late 1945, returning immediately to the coal mines that his father had worked before him. He never spoke about the Merkers mine to his neighbors, his friends, or his children, keeping the memory of the deep vault buried beneath the noise of industrial steel and smoke. He lived a quiet, unassuming life as a laborer, carrying the heavy burden of what he had seen 2,000 feet underground, until his death in 1988. Major Walter von Blücher faced a different kind of reckoning after the collapse of the Third Reich. He was arrested by military police, stripped of his tailored uniform, and put on trial during the denazification hearings of 1946. The meticulous inventory lists he had signed became the primary evidence against him, proving his direct role in cataloging stolen goods and blood gold. He served 8 years in a federal prison before being released into a broken, divided Germany. He spent his remaining years working as a clerk in Munich, bitter and forgotten, until he died in 1971. General George S. Patton never recorded the full details of the Merkers vault in his official public communiques, preferring to leave the cultural recovery to the specialized monuments officers. But he did mention the cavern once, in a private letter to his wife, Beatrice, written just days after his descent into the salt mine. He wrote that he had seen the absolute limit of human greed and human cruelty filed under the same warehouse roof. He noted that the gold would melt away and the art would return home, but the empty spaces left behind by the owners of those gold teeth would never be filled. Some historians have argued that General George S. Patton went beyond his traditional military authority by transforming a secure battlefield recovery operation into an aggressive civil investigation. These critics suggest that the rapid deployment of maximum armed security and the public exposure of the inventory ledgers disrupted standard bureaucratic channels, creating unnecessary friction with allied administrative agencies tasked with tracking national property. They believe a more standard military administrative approach would have preserved proper organizational procedures during the chaotic final weeks of the European theater. Others argue the exact opposite, maintaining that Patton's harsh, uncompromising response was the only effective way to handle a massive institutional crime scene. These defenders assert that treating the salt mine vault as both an active museum and a forensic zone prevented widespread looting, preserved critical evidence for subsequent war crimes tribunals, and established a clear precedent for the unconditional repatriation of stolen cultural wealth. What is certain is that the deep vault near Merkers became a defining symbol of the intersection between industrial exploitation and battlefield justice, ensuring that the recovery of European art remained permanently tied to the hard documentation of historical atrocities. April 1945. A salt mine near Merkers, Thuringia, Germany. A cold, wet wind blows across the entrance of a dark shaft that drops 2,100 feet into the earth. Inside, the air smells of damp salt and old stone. A small group of American soldiers moves through the darkness with flashlights. They follow a tip from a displaced person who spoke of hidden paintings. The flashlights illuminate hundreds of wooden crates stacked from floor to ceiling. Inside the crates sit masterpieces by Rembrandt, Monet, and Renoir, the stolen cultural heritage of an entire continent. But tucked behind the art are smaller bags. They contain something else entirely. They contain hundreds of kilograms of gold dental fillings, pulled from the mouths of concentration camp victims before their bodies were burned. General Patton is about to discover what lies inside this underground vault, and his response will shock everyone.